This week, Reverend Wendy takes us through the danger zone as she continues her series on Jean Houston's book, The Wizard of Us. Reverend Wendy explores the dangers of getting off of our spiritual path and being drawn into sleep, and how to avoid these dangers.
So a lot of you have been saying to me as we have been exploring this series that is based on a spiritual look at the story of the Wizard of Oz, so many of you have been saying, this is so much fun. So much fun, and quite a few of you have said that you have rewatched the movie, whoops, and that you've watched it with new eyes and are seeing things and hearing things and being inspired by things that maybe you hadn't been for a very long time. So we are in the 5th week of this exploration of the Wizard of Oz. We have looked in the past at each of the characters. We have looked at the Scarecrow, who was looking for what? A brain. We have looked at the Tin Man, who's looking for his heart. We looked at the cow or the lion, who is looking for courage, right? And of course, Dorothy is looking for what? To go home. And isn't it interesting that we have Dorothy no sooner away from home that all she wants to do is what? Get right back there. And so they are traveling on this journey on the yellow brick road to the Emerald City to meet with the wonderful Wizard of Oz, because they believe that in meeting with him, they will each get the thing that they feel is missing. And so in the case of Dorothy, she is wanting to be able to get back home. In the case of the Scarecrow, he is wanting the brain that he doesn't feel he has. In the case of the Tin Man, he is wanting the heart that he longs for. And in the case of the lion, he is wanting some courage or some noive, right? And so they each are on this journey to acquire something, to have a need met that they think can be met externally through this encounter with the wonderful Wizard of Oz. And of course, this story, like so many favorite stories that have stood the test of time, is really more than just a children's story. When we look more deeply into it, we see that it is a story of the hero's journey. And the hero is each and every one of us. And each and every one of us truly is on a journey, a life journey. Each of us has a soul that longs to expand, to express. Each of us has a soul that has incarnated at this point in time into the very circumstances that we find ourselves in, with the people that we call our family, our friends, our sandpaper to the soul people. We have each incarnated into this period of time and into the circumstances we find ourselves in, because our soul has something both to give, to receive, and to grow. And we might say that our entire life experience is a journey toward the expression of and the fulfillment of that. And that truly is a hero's journey. And like any hero's journey, there are aspects of it that are the same regardless of the uniqueness of each individual taking that journey. And that's what we've been exploring together, particularly through the book written by Jean Houston, The Wizard of Oz. The title I've picked for my message this morning is The Danger Zone. The danger zone. Say that with me. The danger zone. The danger zone. And so I have a bit of a homework assignment for you. And that homework assignment is to sit for a while with the question, what's your danger zone? What's your danger zone? What's your danger zone? When, where, how, and why do you lose it? What is it? What is it? What I mean by it could be one of two things: your actual spiritual awakening, or that dream or goal that you're looking for, that thing you're wanting to accomplish in your life. I rather hope it is your spiritual awakening. But regardless, I'd like you to sit with the question, what is it that causes you to lose it? Maybe it's a particular circumstance in your life. Maybe it's a particular relationship in your life. There's a pattern. Have you ever noticed about yourself that you have patterns? Nod your head if you notice. And you find yourself responding in the same way over different kinds of triggers, but you respond in the same way, and you think, oh boy, here I go again. This seems so familiar. It's bringing up the same thing in me, even though the circumstance is different or the person is different. Nod your head if you know what I'm talking about. I think that's true probably for most of us. We live in a time, you hear me say this frequently, that is an exciting time. It's a challenging time, very much so, but it's also an exciting time on many, many different levels. And I think that one of the levels on which we are living that is so exciting is that this whole idea of spiritual growth and spiritual awakening is so much more common now than it ever was. When I began this work, both when I began studying this material in the 70s and then when I began working as a minister in 1980, it was not nearly as common. People weren't talking about awakening spiritually, right? But so many today are talking about that. And so many today are asking for and trying to put into practice in their lives tools and techniques and ways of being to help them awaken in a full way as a spiritual being, to embody that, not just to hear it or understand the theory of it, but to actually embody that. So in the story of The Wizard of Oz, which is this hero's journey, which means it is our journey, there is something that happens along that journey that has to do with us falling asleep. And you may remember in the story the way it goes. We've got Dorothy and Toto. We have the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman and the Cowardly Lion, and they are wandering on the yellow brick road, and they're at a point where they can finally see the Emerald City. And I can't remember for sure, but I rather suspect that at that point in the movie, they are feeling so excited and happy, and I bet their pace is quickening a little bit. In fact, I know for myself, when I've gotten close to the accomplishment or the fulfillment of a goal or a dream, my pace quickens, my heart beats faster because I am happy. I'm excited. Can you relate to that? Right? So they see this beautiful Emerald City, and they believe with every fiber of their being that the fulfillment of what they long for resides there, and that all they have to do is get there. And then they will have their way home. They will have their brain. They will have their heart. They will have their courage. Have you ever felt that way in your journey? All I have to do is get there. And have you noticed that it's almost like as soon as you are close, there's a surprise that happens. And we probably don't want to call it surprise, because surprise usually sounds like something positive that we're looking for. And what shows up is usually not a surprise where we go, oh, wonderful. It's usually something that we go, oh, God. Right? And so for them, they see this beautiful field of poppies between them and the Emerald City, and they know that they need to go to the Emerald City. But who is the one that doesn't want them to get there? The Wicked Witch of the West. The Wicked Witch of the West. And do you remember the scene? She's in this dark castle. And she's got one of those angry, mean monkeys, the flying monkeys, one of them is next to her. And she's got this huge crystal ball. Somebody gave me, from our church, recently gave me this quartz crystal. I almost brought it today. It's gorgeous. And people, when they see it in my library at home, say, I didn't know you were into magic and had crystal balls. It looks just like the one that the Wicked Witch is looking at. And as she's looking in this crystal ball, what does she see? She sees Dorothy and the Scarecrow and the Tin Man and the Cowardly Lion, and she realizes, oh my gosh, they're getting close. I can't let them get close. I've got to stop them. And she decides that what she needs is a poison, and she's got her stone and mortar and pestle, and she's stirring and stirring this magic potion. And the magic potion, she says, has got to be something that is attractive to the eye and soothing to the smell. And she decides that what that is a potion that will make the poppies put these characters to sleep as soon as they walk through the field of poppies. So they start walking through, and at first it's just beautiful and wonderful, and then you notice it's like they're walking through molasses. They get slower and slower until they each fall asleep. Boy, is that a powerful metaphor. That is such a powerful metaphor to describe what so often happens to us in our hero's journey. There is undoubtedly at least a point, if not a few of them, where we are on our road of becoming, where we are working toward and moving forward toward a goal or an objective or a different lifestyle, a different way of being, moving toward a greater spiritual maturity and awakening, whatever it is that we are moving toward, and suddenly we stop. It's as if we fall asleep. And that's the first of the 5 danger zones that I want to talk to you about. The first is that there is a time in our hero's journey, and I bet you can look back in other journeys in your life that you've made where there's been a time where you were partially awake and then you fell asleep. And then you fell asleep. How many times do people get so close to their Emerald City, just like our characters did, only to fall asleep before actually getting there? I've often wondered about people who have journeyed long and hard to accomplish something significant in their lives, who have met with countless setbacks and challenges, and then finally just give up. And the thing I always wonder, and maybe it's because at heart I am such a dreamer and such a visionary, really. In the core of my being, I've often wondered, I wonder how many more steps it might have taken. That if they had just had the right people around them, the right strength within them, the right faith, the right spiritual practice, that they would have gotten there. But just this side of there, wherever there is for them, they stopped. They fell asleep. They gave up. I remember reading a piece many years ago about a stone cutter knocking or hitting away, chiseling away at a big piece of stone, and how many times he has to hit with that hammer to that chisel before the rock finally breaks and he can do whatever it is that he wants to do with that rock. And it might appear that the 101st blow was the one that finally broke that rock in two, and oh, how tempting it is to say it is that 101st blow, the one that actually seems to do it, when in reality it is not just that last one, is it? It's what? Every single one that preceded it. And what if he had stopped at number 99? Right? And so I just ask you, and whatever you feel that you're really being pulled toward in your life, whether it is a certain spiritual maturity and awakening or some more physical, tangible goal that's important to you, are you staying awake? Are you refusing to just discount all the steps you've already taken? Will you take one step more? Why do we tend to fall asleep? Why do we tend to become, we could call it, apathetic or lazy when we get close to the accomplishment of our goals? Why do you think? Huh? Not enough sleep? Well, maybe. Of the physical kind, not of the spiritual kind, right? I'm sure that's what you're meaning. Fear. What else? Oh, distractions. Absolutely, positively. Distractions. What else? Yes. Yes, there is a fear of succeeding, right? Or there is a fear for, excuse me, I'm fighting with my throat a little bit today. There's a fear that we may have of doing better than those we love, and so we hold ourselves back. And so in order to overcome these danger zones, we have to first know that they exist so that we can name it correctly when we see it popping up in our lives. And as soon as we can name it correctly, then we are far better equipped to actually figure out what to do with it. But if we don't pay attention to it, if we don't name it, we're going to be blindsided by it. The second danger is the backward pull of old friends and old relationships. Let me take some here. The backward pull of old friends and old relationships. So there are many people who have made a decision to awaken spiritually. There are many people who have dreams and goals and set about changing themselves, growing, developing, stretching, trying new and different things. And what often happens, or what can happen, is the backward pull of those who knew us before we made that decision, right? In the recovery movement, part of what is taught in recovery, especially in the early days and weeks and months of recovery, is you got to stay away from your old haunts, and you got to stay away from your old buddies that were drinking or smoking or doing whatever you're trying to stop doing. Very sound, solid, real wisdom in that. Why? Because otherwise there's this backward pull to put us right back where we were before. When one person in a relationship changes, the whole dynamic of the relationship changes. Take that in. That's a really important piece to know. When one person in a relationship changes, the whole dynamic of the relationship changes. Sometimes, when one person changes in a relationship, it can force open, in a very positive way, new ways of being for everyone in the relationship. But oftentimes what happens is not that. Oftentimes what happens when one changes in a relationship, the others are impacted, don't know what to do, and the pull is backward because they want you to be the way you were. Why? Because that's what they're familiar with. They don't have to grow and change if you stay the same, right? Right? Okay, so got to know that that's a danger zone. A third danger zone is when we don't have a wake-up system in place. When we don't have a wake-up system in place. It's vital to have others who will not fall asleep while you're trying to pursue your journey to the Emerald City or your own spiritual awakening. You've got to have others around you who will not fall asleep and will encourage you to stay awake. It's so much nicer to have people around you that really care about you as a spiritual unfolding being, that want to stay awake with you and help you stay awake. That's a much nicer way to stay awake than the cosmic 2x4 that the universe will eventually send our way if we refuse to awaken. Have any of you had a close encounter with the cosmic 2x4 before? Only a few of you. Okay, well, good for you that haven't. Most people I know, I've had cosmic 2x4s try to awaken them. And it can certainly be a way of waking up, but it's not the way I recommend. You know, Jesus, before Jesus performed, this is an insight a lot of people who think they understand Jesus lose track of. Before he performed any, quote, miracles, before he did any of his teaching, he drew to him a team of people. We call them, they're called the disciples, right? But he drew to him a team of people to help and to support him and what he was trying to accomplish. They weren't perfect. Heaven knows they weren't perfect, and they sometimes actually got in the way and made things more difficult. And at the most difficult time in his life that we know of, that's recorded in the Gospels, when he was praying in the Garden of Gethsemane, he knew that what we call Good Friday was about to happen, the crucifixion. He's in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he is praying for the way out. You know, he's basically doing that prayer that all of us have done before. God, if you get me out of this, I promise blah, blah, blah. He didn't say, I promise blah, 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 but it was basically, if there's any way I can get out of this, I want to get out of this. But a key part was he brought with him we're told his favorite disciples. And he only asked them to do one thing. Stay awake. Stay awake and watch with me. He wanted to go, and he did, according to the gospel. He went into a deep state of prayer and meditation. And he simply wanted his disciples, his favorite ones, to stay awake with him and watch and hold a spiritual awareness for him. Intuitively, he knew how helpful that would be for him in his journey. And what did they wind up doing? They fell asleep. They fell asleep. So he didn't pick as wisely, maybe. Maybe the other 9 would have done a better job. We don't know. But the point is, he recognized the value of having in place those who could be his wake-up system, those who would stay awake and see for him and know for him what he was trying to struggle through on his own. Don't you think if somebody like Jesus, a master teacher, recognized the value of that maybe there's a place for you to cultivate that in your own life, to make sure that you have 1 or 2 people that help you to stay awake, who help you to remember and know the spiritual truth about yourself and about how life works when maybe you are really struggling, or maybe you are falling asleep, maybe you are forgetting. 4th danger zone is a little bit similar to having those who stay awake for us, but not exactly the same. It is to have mentors, to have those who have gone further than we have. If our journey is a journey where our primary desire and goal is true, abiding spiritual awakening, then we want to make sure that we have spiritual mentors around us who have genuinely experienced a greater awakening and a more consistent awakening than we ourselves have yet to experience. If it is a journey toward accomplishing a dream or a goal in our lives, then we want to make sure that we have around us and that we tap into those who've already accomplished that, so we can turn to them and we can seek counsel and guidance and advice and support, that we can know more of what that journey is so that we don't have to make all the same mistakes ourselves. But it requires a certain degree of humility, does it not? To say, I'm going to seek out those who have gone further than I have. And why does it take humility? Absolutely, Terry. We have to admit first to ourselves and then to the other that we're not quite there yet ourselves. None of us starts at the top of the game. How many of you have ever taken up a new skill or new activity or new sport? Raise your hand. How did you look or sound the first few days or weeks of it? Tell me. Okay, I think thumbs down. Anybody ever learned skiing? Something I can relate to. How'd you look the first few days? You probably couldn't get off the chairlift without falling, right? No, you all got off the chairlift the first time. That wasn't true for me. That wasn't true for me. But what do we long for? We long to look like the one who's totally accomplished, because the ego in us doesn't want to be embarrassed. The ego in us doesn't want to start as a beginner. Heavens, no. We want to start where? Come on, be honest with me. You're second service, and you've had an extra hour of sleep. We want to start, maybe not at the top, maybe we're not that unrealistic, but we just don't want to look like an absolute beginner. Same thing with anything spiritual that we set as a goal or an objective for us. And so to ask for help of a mentor, of someone who has gone, that we believe sincerely has done more than we have, requires a degree of humility and teachability. It requires some vulnerability. We're basically saying, you've gone further than I have. I see that you know more than I have. I'm not pushing down or ignoring what I have learned, but I see in you something that encourages me to be able to take that next step. Can I reach out to you for some help and support? My experience with that personally is whenever I have reached out to somebody that I see as a mentor, they have always been willing to say yes, because it's very honoring to be asked to do that for another. So mentors are an important part of dealing with the danger zone. The danger zone is when we fall asleep and give up. And the fifth and the last is this, that we've stopped paying close, regular, and frequent. We've stopped paying close, regular, and frequent attention to our inner worlds, our inner grooming, so to speak. Do you remember that adorable part of the movie where Dorothy, so they finally wake up from the field of poppies, and they get where? They get to the Emerald City. Of course, it's not going to turn out that their journey ends at that first encounter of the Emerald City, but they get there, and they're kind of bedraggled. They've been wandering around an awful lot, right? And so they are taken, escorted to the wash and brush up shop. Do you remember that part? You know, and I can still remember the lion coming out all coiffed with those funny little bows, right? You know, and they all look sparkly and wonderful. I think that we need to turn that within, and we need to ask of ourselves, where do I need to kind of get cleaned up inside? Not outside, inside. Do I need to clean up my thinking? Do I need to clean up my attitude? Do I need to clean up my emotions? Do I need to clean up the fact that wherever I go, I leave this horrible emotional wake behind me? What in me needs to be, it's like a purification process, really. Theirs in the story was an outer purification, an outer cleaning up. What I'm talking about is an inner cleaning up. Very much like what is done again in recovery in the fourth step of taking a fearless moral inventory and then working to make amends and clearing all of that up. All of that up. So this danger zone, the fifth danger zone, requires some very basic vigilance and some genuine honesty of looking at and paying attention to the thoughts that we think, the words that we say, the actions that we take, the energy that we bring into our relationships, the way we show up in life, for example, when we get a no. To me, one of the telltale signs of a person's spiritual and emotional maturity is how they act when another person or life says no. And some people grow up all over each other. That's a quote from my dear friend Kathy Hearn. They grow up like throw up, is the point, all over each other, rather than actually saying, wait a minute, what got triggered in me here? What needs to be cleansed here? What's mine? Where do I need to grow? Where do I need to shift my thinking? What do I need to take true, genuine responsibility for? Maybe where do I need to make amends? Where do I need to practice forgiveness? These are the kinds of things that help us to purify ourselves, our minds, our hearts, our behaviors from the inside out. Let me close with a piece here from Jean Houston in the book. If you are reading along in the book, there are a couple of things that you've probably noticed by now. You've probably noticed the rich inclusion of specific exercises that Jean gives for each and every part of the journey. Exercises that I neither have the time on a Sunday morning nor is it a place to try to teach what those exercises are, but they're very, very valuable. So you've probably noticed that if you're reading the book. You've probably also noticed that Jean does this beautiful dual approach, I'm going to call, where she refers everything to us as an individual, but then also invites us to look at how all of this plays out on a much larger scale. And it reminds me very much of what we speak about in our mission here at Unity, and that is our own individual transformation. I know, it will be back up soon. Our own individual transformation, but that we don't end with our own individual transformation, that we care as much about our transformation as we care about the healing of all of the hurts and all of the issues in our world, in our human family. So this piece I want to close with is Jean writing to that bigger field of which we are all a part. She writes, realize that if an idea is really important to you, considerable resistance will often arise to impede your commitment to its becoming. We must be strong, reconnect with ourselves and others, recommit to our goals, and resist the urge to give up. We must step into our mythic selves and co-create within that greater story. We no longer have the luxury of extended periods of entropy. Perhaps the emerging new renaissance of spirit is what the Mayans and the Hopi people have prophesied. They have long foretold the end of a world age and the transition to a new order of beginning. As the elders of the Hopi nation told us, create your community, be good to each other, and do not look outside yourself for the leader. We are the ones we have been waiting for. It is time for us to turn off our televisions and tune into the wise one, the wizard within us, who has the power to regreen the world and create a bright future for all beings. Namaste.
Thanks for listening. The Unity Center, transforming lives and healing our world. Check us out Sundays at 9 and 11. Subscribe to our podcasts and download our free app for instant access to a wealth of spiritual teachings, services, and events.